Hello, this is Curt Pringle. Thank you for tuning in to our Talking Issues series. And today I get to talk about something I'm really excited about. So when I was mayor of Anaheim in 2005, my wife and I and some business leaders in Anaheim, along with some government leaders, went to Colorado Springs, the home of most of the Olympic committees for the United States in Colorado Springs. And our goal was to lure USA Volleyball in some fashion to Anaheim. They had just built the Anaheim Sports Center, which is at the time, the largest indoor volleyball facility in America. So those folks wanted to really put volleyball on the map in Anaheim. And believe it or not, we were successful. And the men's team, Men's USA Volleyball, moved to Anaheim in 2006. And with that, we saw an exciting 2008 under the coaching leadership of Hugh McCutcheon, and the men's team was very successful in that 2008 Olympics. So even more volleyball came here, and that's a part of the story today because I'm very excited to have an Orange County resident, a prominent person, if not the most prominent person in USA Volleyball, gold medalist in indoor volleyball in 1984 and 1988. And gold medalist, and the first time beach volleyball was an Olympic sport in 1996. And that's my friend Karch Kiraly. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. And that was really cool how you referred to the men doing so well. Gold medal in the 2008 Beijing Olympics.
Right. We were in
That's the last one.
The last
we're
gold medal.
We're going to talk about that, but we're trying to get there again in LA 28.
Yes. So right now you are the coach of the USA men's national team.
Yes, just became coach of the USA men.
Congratulations.
A few months ago. Thank you.
And we'll get to what got you to this point today, but why don't we start? How did you get involved in volleyball as a sport?
My father played a lot growing up. He is actually from Hungary. That explains the weird look of my last name and the silent L.
Yes.
And so he played on the Hungarian junior national team and was a part of the peaceful but very short-lived revolution that happened in the fall of 1956 when Hungary thought they were going to get their own country back from the Soviet Union. The Soviets sent in their army and their tanks to crush that, and he knew that unless he ran out of the country, escaped, he would be captured, tortured, and executed. So he came here. And that's one of the beautiful things about the United States is more than any other country in the history of the world, you can be the architect of your own destiny. And he built himself a new destiny here. And so he kept playing volleyball until he was 70-something and taught me the game when I was very young. And we became a beach volleyball team. I started playing when I was 11 years old.
Oh.
And so we played together for about 4 years. Places like Corona Del Mar and Huntington and all up and down the coast. And so he infected me with the love for the game that I still have now.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. So indoor volleyball is what a lot of people know traditionally. And that is, I can't remember how many people on the court at one time.
6 on a side indoors, 2 on a side on the beach.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So there was indoor volleyball was the only Olympic sport until 1996 in the area of volleyball, right?
Yeah.
So you were successful there. Did you go to college and play volleyball in college? And that's what propelled you here? Is that?
That was a big part of it. Certainly volleyball is expanding across the country. It's for boys volleyball, which it was pretty rare, but now almost 30 states have sanctioned varsity boys high school volleyball. But California has been one of the states that had it the longest, along with like Hawaii and a few others. And so I got to play at Santa Barbara High School. But to play all the great high schools in Orange County, Corona Del Mar, and Newport Harbor, Laguna Beach, San Clemente, Manhattan, with Miracosta. And so there are lots of great schools. And then went to college at UCLA, had a great program there. legendary Coach Al Skates, who won 19 NCAA championships over his 50 years coaching there. USC was really good. We had a great crosstown rivalry. And then a lot of the USC and UCLA guys, all on the same year, all at the same time, tried out for Team USA. And then we got to start working together instead and being on the same side of the net.
That's awesome. So when did women's volleyball become as prominent as it is today? I mean, how did that grow?
Women's volleyball was a little behind. The first NCAA championship for volleyball on the men's side was 1970. On the women's side, I think it was 1981. But the women have grown dramatically. And so there are probably almost every one of the 340 Division I universities and colleges have a women's volleyball team, a varsity women's volleyball team. Far fewer on the men's side. I think there obviously have to be some equity things. And when you have football on the men's side, it's more difficult to add other men's sports when you need to be adding women's sports to kind of make up the difference in head count. But so women's volleyball has grown dramatically. And in fact, women's sand volleyball has exploded as a collegiate sport. Also, that was
you said sand. That's not beach.
Sand because it is beach, but many of the schools are land-based and aren't on a coast. So you can call it what you want, beach, sand. But it was the
Eiffel Tower,
or Eiffel Tower, exactly. But you can. Beach volleyball, women's collegiate beach/sand volleyball, was the fastest sport between kind of test sport and trial and error to full-fledged NCAA championship. It took, I think, less than 2 years. So it's also exploding.
Wow. So I was once told that there are more scholarships written for women in volleyball than any other collegiate sport. That may not be the case today, but that's what I was told. So I encourage all the tall girl parents to at least have a try to see if that's a viable sport for them.
Absolutely. Women's and girls volleyball as a team sport has exploded and become the number one participatory team sport ahead of sports like basketball and soccer. And so it's found in every nook and cranny of the country. And like I said, on the boys' side, it's also growing quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So with beach volleyball, I mean, you were, really it obviously is different because you have two people and you have to cover a lot of territory in the sand. So, I mean, I understand that. So what are the different attributes necessary? I mean, in indoor volleyball, it seems height is a very important thing. And I don't know if that's as significant in beach, but maybe this is from a person who has no knowledge of that. So,
oh, good question. Indoors, when you have 6 players on the court, well, a lot of people have noticed in the last 25 years or so, there is almost always one player on the court with a different colored jersey, a defensive specialist, called the libero position or libero position. And in fact, indoors with 6 people on the court at any one instant, there is a lot more specialization. So we think of indoor volleyball as there are 5 different positions: outside hitter, middle, setter, opposite, and libero. On the beach, it's much less of a specialization with only 2, even though there you can have some specialization. One partner might be taller. Maybe that's the net player, the blocker. The other player roams around more in the backcourt behind that block. But they both have to be great offensively, because if you and I are a team together, our opposition can serve you if they think you're the weaker offensively, and you would pass, I would set, and you would attack. Or they can come at me. Or if they try you and fail because you're so good on offense, then they'll come at me and see what happens. So you have to be ready for a much greater variety of challenges, and it leads to playing beach volleyball is something I recommend to all volleyball players, even if they're only focusing more indoors, because you learn to be a much better, well-rounded, all-around player.
Yeah. just seems like a lot of work. And has the U.S. women's, men's dominated in beach volleyball? I mean, it seems like our teams are always very good at their beach volleyball.
Our beach teams, for the first time, won no medals in Paris. Up until then, the USA had had tremendous success. The names that will ring the most, that will sound the most familiar, were Misty May Trainer of Orange County and Carrie Walsh Jennings, and they won 3 straight gold medals in 3 straight Olympics: 2004 in Athens, 2008 in Beijing, 2012 in London. That's an incredible accomplishment. They just dominated in their sport. I think they won something like 120 some matches in a row at one point. They were really, really good. But there were also other great teams on the men's side too. So this was the first Olympics, I think, since you mentioned beach volleyball was first added to the program in 1996. I think this was the first Olympics where no medals were won in beach volleyball by USA.
Wow. So in your gold medal team of 1996, who was your partner in that?
My partner was Kent Steffes.
Okay, sure.
And we got to
they all know.
great American friends across the net. So we had an all-American final, and that was really gratifying. We wanted to show the world how good we were, how strong beach volleyball is in this country. We had a great professional tour called the AVP Tour running at that time, and so we got to play Mike Whitmarsh and Mike Dodd across the net in that All-American final. So it was fantastic for Americans to win gold and silver.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things with the Olympics, and we'll talk about the Olympics since you were able to represent and coach a team there in 2024, but there are always new sports being added that, what is it? Obviously, the beach volleyball caught on. People loved it. People engaged in it. It's probably one of those that it doesn't require big fields and everything like that to manage. So you probably had a greater growth in that, as you said. But what are some of the things the Olympics Committee looks to bring a new sport in? Like there was breakdancing, I think, this year. And what would be the disqualifier to take them out based on performance?
That's a good question. For one, each host gets quite a bit of autonomy in deciding which sports to add. So it's no surprise that the LA 28 Olympics, the USA is so excited about baseball and softball. So LA 28 is adding back in baseball and softball.
So both of those were sports in the Olympics?
Those were sports, then they were out, then they'll be back, and then will they stay? One of the things that led to their being left out of the Olympics, one of the things the International Olympic Committee looks at is just world participation. How many countries in the world play softball on a very popular level? And not that many. How many countries are really into baseball? They like it when many countries play because it leads to more competitive Olympics, and rather than just certain countries. And so that's the struggle for baseball and softball. For volleyball, there are already 200 countries 200 plus that have volleyball as a really popular sport. And so it was an easy add, but it was still a kind of a test in 1996. It was so well received the reception, the popularity of that particular competition in Atlanta. But B, the other thing is when a lot of countries already play volleyball, and then you add beach volleyball, now a country that was struggling to form a team indoors and needed 6 or 7 great players, now they only need 2 and they can contend for a gold medal. So it's actually led to countries like Latvia that would probably never win an indoor medal at the Olympics, winning a beach medal at the Olympics. And so it was really smart of them to add that, because one country with just 2 players can contend for a medal, like Qatar and who has now won a medal in the sport of beach volleyball.
Oh, I think it's really interesting to walk down that Olympic story. So, how many Olympics have you been a part of?
Oh boy, every Olympics since 1984, except the Sydney Olympics, which I attended, but I was only working and doing some sponsor receptions and things like that.
Is that right?
Been involved in a lot of competition. I also got to work 2 Olympics as a television broadcaster for NBC. That was a great experience in Athens 04 and Beijing 08. And then I got into coaching starting in 2012.
Yes. So 2012, you started coaching here in Anaheim.
Yep, assistant
Mets.
to Hugh, and he switched over from the men to the women. Right after he led the men to a gold medal in Beijing. And of course, most people probably don't remember, but it was a horrendous incident where Hugh's father-in-law was attacked and murdered in China. His mother-in-law almost died from that attack. And part of his decision-making process was that in terms of switching and becoming the women's indoor coach. And so I got to work for him. And he coached the women's team to a great silver medal in the London Olympics.
Right. So here you have the shift to Anaheim in 2006
with the men.
And then in that Olympics,
he goes to the women's. So he brought the women's program, and now both programs are here starting in 2009.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. There's so much to talk about because during that time, yes, it was challenging for Hugh. Here is his first Olympics as from this new team going there to Beijing and having the family challenge, and then the men were not expected to win a gold medal in that year, so it was a great comeback victory, and then going with the women after that. So you were his assistant in that 2012 Olympics, and then you have been the head coach after that.
Yeah, after that Olympics, it was before the Olympics that he agreed to it, but after it actually happened, it fit his family really well. It was a great career move that he decided to stop being USA coach and become the coach at the University of Minnesota for the women's program. So that left an opening. I was already an assistant on his staff and applied for the job and became coach as his successor.
Yes. So I don't know if people realize that you have the national team is known as the national team until you're selected as an Olympian or the Olympic team, and that selection is made long into the process. So you just accepted in December, I think, the position as the men's coach.
Mm-hmm.
So every 4 years, there really is a full reevaluation of who are those members of the U.S. teams, be they men or women. So you're in the very, very beginning stages of that process for how do you go about selecting the players? How do you go about looking at who you have and how they fit into the picture? I mean, how does that process work to prepare today for something that's going to take place in 2028?
It's a really interesting process. As you mentioned, Hugh went from men to women. I'm going from coaching women to coaching men. And so I'm learning a whole new population.
Yes.
A lot of people I knew, but not as coach-player relationship, but as just cheering on these great people, great players. We have to study the world of college volleyball very closely. Somebody like the NBA has their development league, their D League. For volleyball, the D League. And for most Olympic sports, the D League is college sports. Yeah. And so we're studying that landscape, all the great college volleyball programs. We also study the professional landscape because after somebody finishes their college eligibility, then they'll go play in professional leagues part of the year. In places like Italy, Poland, Germany, Turkey, France, Japan, Brazil, and other countries. So once you're done with college and you become a full-time volleyball player, you spend part of your year playing professional volleyball and the other part of your year playing country versus country international volleyball for any respective national team. So we got to study what's happening in the pro game. We have a whole video system where we can watch matches that just happened yesterday in Turkey or Italy or wherever, and stay in very close contact with all of our players. Looking at those 5 positions I touched on before, looking at the people who've already been with the program, looking at the people who've never spent time with the program and trying to develop it all. And then, like you said, not really figuring out what our 12-person roster might be until just a few months before the LA Olympics. And once that selection is made, that's the only time we get to call the exact same team. We changed the name from the national team to now they are the USA Olympic team.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And put it in context with the men versus the women. How many collegiate sanctioned women teams are there versus men's teams?
Well, there are hundreds. There are 340 varsity programs for women and hundreds that's just in D1. Then there's D2, D3, NAIA. So there are probably something like 15,000 scholarships available for women and maybe a couple of hundred for men. So it's always been really impressive that men have a far smaller talent pool to draw from and still do so well quite consistently at the Olympics and are always contenders to win medals. In this last Olympics in Paris, the women's team that I coached won the silver medal, and the men's team won.
I was going to out that much more. So you just worked through it. I read a familiar script there. No, I wanted to make sure that
both programs won medals, and it was a great accomplishment for both the men and the women. We both were striving and shooting for gold, came up a little short. Here comes LA 28. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. But also in that context of who is in the pool and available, you emphasize there are so many women engaged collegiately. Isn't that the same principle as it addresses professional volleyball leagues? I don't know if people really realize that you have leagues in all of these countries.
Yeah.
And though they're paying leagues to pay people to in a competitive sense, as we look at the NBA or the NHL or something, you have volleyball leagues all around the world.
Absolutely. And many people might not have heard, but there are now on the women's side, because of the growth and the numbers of participation, there are actually 2 professional indoor volleyball leagues, one that started about a year ago, the other that started this year. So they're both in their season right now. A lot of the women who played and represented us in the Paris Olympics are playing in those leagues, almost all of them. That hasn't happened on the men's side yet, but we're hoping that we can make that happen in a few years. But on the men's side, people are playing all in countries all over the world. You could play professionally for as little as maybe $1,000 a month for a 7-month season, or you could play, and if you're one of the best players in the world, you could be making over $1 million for a 7-month season playing in a place like Russia, Poland, Italy, Turkey, Japan, some of the top leagues.
So Russia, Germany, Japan, and Poland, those are the countries that have the strongest leagues, or they pay the most?
It depends on whether you're talking men or women. On the men's side, probably the strongest leagues are Poland, Italy, Russia, Japan. Even though very few American players are playing in Russia right now because we've had a war going on, and it's not the easiest thing to play there. And a lot of us might even wonder, wow, would anybody feel safe playing there? But there is one of the great Americans, Micah Christensen, who's a setter, the starting setter for the last 3 Olympic campaigns on the men's side, Rio, Tokyo, and Paris. And he is playing in Russia in a city called Kazan, feels completely safe, plays in a really high level league, and so brings his family there, wife and 3 young children. And so, yeah, you can find some interesting places to play professional volleyball,
Yes.
even in interesting political climates.
Yes, exactly. But back in your Olympic athlete days, I always thought there was a line that said you couldn't be a professional.
You are absolutely right. That line has essentially disappeared. There used to be a very hardcore definition of what a professional is. I mean, we could dig way, way back. A guy like Jim Thorpe, one of the great athletes of the first half of the 20th century, but I think because he took $100 playing a semi-pro football season one time, he could not compete in the Olympics. Now it is completely open, and so you have the pro tennis players
Right.
competing in the Olympics.
NHL players.
You have NHL players.
This
You
year.
have pro soccer players. So on that level, it has become, and when baseball is in, the professional baseball players will represent their country. So it's truly open to all now. In some ways, I think that's it's a great decision, because when the definition was really hardcore, it meant the countries who were not, who were free market countries, not communist countries, they had to be, for example, collegiate basketball players were the only ones who could play. But the players who played for the Soviet Union and other programs, they were truly professional, but it was just, they weren't handed money. They were given a car, they were given an apartment, they were given stipends and cost of living things. And so, so it was really pros against collegians, and now it is truly the best in the world, no matter what the country.
Oh, that is awesome. So you prepared the women's team starting in, I'm trying to do my math, in 2020, and as a head coach to begin that process of putting a team on the court in the 2024 Olympics.
Yes, it's normally a 4-year process. We call them Olympic cycles, even though things got a little wonky when one cycle was 5 years with the delay of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics.
Right.
And then it led to a 3-year Olympic cycle from 21 to 24. That did, weirdly enough, probably hard to imagine, but 3 years felt like a very short time between Olympics, and it was more of a rush. But the process always starts that first year of a new Olympic cycle with renewal, with people who are more experienced taking some time off, with new people getting some chances to develop and learn and fall on their faces and pick themselves up. And so it's a fascinating process.
So from that last Olympic experience, looking back to the time you were an athlete in that Olympic experience, share with people what arriving at the Olympic venue means in terms of you getting there, the level of emotion. I mean, I have some friends that were in the canceled games of 1980, I think. Is that?
Yes, the UFA women's volleyball team qualified for that Olympics. The men did not, and they were not able to play because of the boycott.
Right. And therefore they lost so much. But for you to take your team there, what share with people that process of arrival, what happens, how do people live, how does the village coordinate, all that kind of stuff.
You had asked, it's a long process. We already have a list of over 60 people who could be considered as possibles for the next Olympics. And here we are early in 2025.
Yes.
There will be more names added to that. So over the course of an Olympic cycle, typically we've had about 80 people with some players with some involvement of the process. Eventually, you get down to 12, and then that 12 plus the staff that we have, travels to the Olympic Village, travels to the Olympic City, Olympic Village. One of the first things they get to do, the Olympic Committee calls it TUWE, like TUWE, something Team USA welcome experience. And they come out of that with the biggest smiles on their face because they get so much gear and Nike and Ralph Lauren and just come away with these huge bags of stuff. And maybe one of the most exciting things during that few hours is they get their opening ceremonies outfit, which nobody knows what it's going to look like because it's kept a secret for several years. But they try it all on, get it all fitting right. That might be on a Monday. Few days later on Friday night, that's the night. Friday night is the opening of the Olympic. Like, I'm telling you this and I'm getting massive goosebumps right now. I can't even describe what it's like to go through, walk into that stadium, although Paris was unique. If people watched, people were on the boat.
Yes.
But normally you walk into a stadium like I got to do in 1984 in the Olympic Stadium, get to see who's running the torch around. Eventually it was Rayford Johnson who lit the torch then. But it is just an absolutely emotionally, it's like a very emotional high, but also draining. And then you have to pick yourself back up and start the competition. Be careful when you have opening ceremonies on a Friday night. Lots of people who start competing on Saturday morning might not do it at all because they have to save their energy for competition the next day. So that's how the Olympics starts. You arrive, get into your village, get into your suite of bedrooms, get your gear, start practicing and prepping for that first competition.
Yeah. So that lasts over 2 weeks.
Yes.
So you don't play over 2 weeks necessarily. I mean, a lot of sports are
some sports are done in 3 days.
and you stay there.
There's rugby sevens that I think this last Paris Olympics, I think the men did Wednesday, Thursday, opening ceremonies Friday, Saturday, and their competition was done on Saturday. Indoor volleyball is notorious for having a lot of teams and playing every other day. So indoor volleyball lasts almost from the day after the Olympics until closing ceremonies. So it will often last 15 or 16 days. It's a very long competition. The bad news about that is, unlike, let's say, swimming in the first week, gymnastics, who does their events and then gets a chance to kind of chill and relax and enjoy the others a little and go see other sports.
Yes.
Volleyball's all the way through from start to finish. So there's never any real let up. And it still, we carve out family time and things like that. But there's no real and just being able to completely relax until the competition is done. The women this last Olympics didn't finish until 5 hours before closing ceremonies.
Oh, is that right?
Actually, 3 hours before. They had to bring their closing ceremonies outfits and put them in the locker room. Then we played the gold medal match. Then they showered, changed, and got a special bus right from there to closing ceremonies.
Wow.
And it started just a day or two into the Olympics themselves.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we, at least a sales point of moving the team here, was actually the altitude.
Yes.
Some people, want to say it was the mayor. That had nothing to do with it, but it was the altitude.
No, that had something to do with it. We are very grateful and thankful that you helped in that effort.
So I think that people don't even see the physical way you play and all the elements that impact how a serve travels, how far it travels, and in thinner air in Colorado Springs, I was always told, you plan to hit that very back line with the serve, and in fact, when you're at sea level, it's not necessarily the same serve.
It's very, very different. And it was a huge disadvantage for the men. If you watch much men's volleyball, you'll see every time they are throwing it way up in the air and jumping and attacking just like they would at the net. It's a really explosive, violent attack. We've timed it recently because we're doing some studies, and our data analyst, our performance analyst, found that the time from if I'm hitting a hard serve on the men's side, from the contact here to the contact on your arms, the fastest is about 0.44 seconds, less than a half a second to respond to that. And that's why they hit it so hard, because there's so little time to adjust and to move and to respond. Yeah. So that serve will have very different travel characteristics at sea level versus at altitude in Colorado Springs. It was a huge disadvantage for the men to be at altitude, and it was a real and a tangible factor in the men's gold medal in 2008 that they moved here 2 years before, and they could practice the serve they would need to hit at sea level in the Olympics themselves.
I guess that was kind of a non sequitur, bringing that up in the middle of the rest of the conversation, but it's one of the only things I know technically about volleyball, other than enjoying it. And I know we in Southern California, but Orange County, Anaheim specifically, will be very excited if, in fact, the Honda Center is selected as.
That would be fantastic. We're just minutes away from where we train. Used to be, as you mentioned, called ASC, American Sports Center, now called Open Gym Premier. But one other thing I didn't mention, forgot to mention, in the serve is not only does the serve move differently, it was affecting the players on the men's team who were receiving that serve, because at altitude they would just let it go, it's going to go past the line. There's less air resistance for the ball to work against and drop. Then they would get to sea level and they would let it go, and it would go in, let it go ace, let it go ace, let it go ace, and it was really getting them into some bad habits too. So that was the other half of what a big deal it was to help the USA men move from altitude in Colorado Springs down here to sea level in Anaheim.
So you have a lot of work to do between now and selecting your team in 2028 and then putting that team on the court. And we're all excited about watching you. And again, hopefully we'll be able to see a lot of volleyball, indoor volleyball at Honda Center. And where are you hearing might be the beach volleyball?
I'm hearing that the likely venue would be on a beach in Santa Monica. Santa Monica has a lot of coastline, but what I'm hearing is it would be several hundred yards north of the Santa Monica Pier, which is that fun pier. I think it has a Ferris wheel and some great restaurants and all kinds of fun stuff there. So it'd be a wonderful venue, and there's a lot of beach parking along that space too.
Very picturesque.
Yes.
And that I will work hard to attend some volleyball games in 2028 to watch you with the men's team. And I would
bring it full circle. You brought it. You helped bring us here. So that would be great to have you in the stands, as hopefully we're competing in Anaheim at the Honda Center.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Karch.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
See you.